All right, so today we're going to talk about appraisals, and I love this topic because, appraisals can make or break a deal. And I feel like when you have a deal in escrow, there's always this nervousness around the appraisal, and people are scared to talk to the appraiser, and they're like, is this friend or foe or what about it? And so I love that we're going to be able to talk about this and have an open forum. We mentioned using the chat. I love using the chat. I love asking questions. So if you have questions, fire away, throw them in there. Let's try to make this as interactive as we can with a Zoom presentation, right? Sometimes when we're in person, you're more likely to throw something out there, but throw out a question if you have one for any of our speakers. And so we'll get right into it. I'm Joe Soto. I'm the team leader here at the Soto team. I've been in the mortgage business since 2003. Some really, good years in the beginning. Then the market crashed. I got my butt kicked. I worked for 3 companies that got shut down by the FDIC in 1 year in 2008. If anybody remembers those years of 2008, give me an amen because you are a survivor like me. And so 3 companies shut down by the FDIC. It was amazing times right there being Joe Soto. There we go. We got some amens. Jamie and Salvador and Deborah. We are beaten and bruised. Yes, Ruth, thank you. And so, yeah, I've been in the mortgage business for many, many years. I love teaching prior to getting into mortgage. I worked as a corporate trainer for Disney. I thought I'd work for Disney forever and did corporate training, and I still love to teach. So I do classes here. I do classes at other boards, office meetings, things like that, because I think education is the key, in this business. I'm super honored and blessed to have Sina with us. I've got Sina and I've got Ralph. They're 2 licensed appraisers that are going to be here and speak as the experts, right? I love bringing them in because they are the ones who know this business better than Joe, better than Janice or Frank or Yesenia or Jamie or any of them, right, or any of us. So we love that we have them. Sina, if you want to give us a little background about you, how long you've been in the business, some of that stuff, that would be great.
So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Zina. I been in the appraisal business since 2016 as a trainee. I got my certification right before COVID hit, and then everything went crazy. So literally in that time frame. And yeah, I'm in San Diego County, so I cover all of San Diego. I do Imperial County as well, but mainly San Diego. And yeah, I'm doing this for the second time with Joe today, so I'm super excited because last time was really, really fun. And that is my part too when I go on inspections, and I've heard it many times from agents that I guess, like a lot of times they have issues with appraisers in terms of like they just go in and out and they don't really communicate. And I believe in the complete opposite. Like, we're in the same industry. The exchange is so valuable. And yeah, I love doing that. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And then we got Mr. Ralph. Ralph, if you can come on and
first of all, thank you everybody for coming and give us the opportunity. I share Sina's point of view as that communication is key. I've been appraising for about 25 years. I've done over almost 30,000 appraisals all over the country, probably about $6 billion in valuations. Typically do about anywhere from $450 to $500 million of valuations a year. And any of these meetings with Joe and an opportunity to teach you is always welcome because knowledge is power. And like I said, communication is huge. We're all professionals. We have a common goal. And when a transaction closes efficiently, everybody wins. So feel free to ask any questions, and we'll do our best to help to resolve those issues.
Awesome. I did put everybody's contact information on there. So you got Zina, you got Ralph, you got me. I've got a little QR code thing that you can scan there if you want to scan and connect. I'm also going to put my social media on there if you want to give me a follow on Instagram. I'm constantly posting educational content, also doing lots of different events there too. If Ralph or Sina have any other sites or anything that they want to share, they can do that. But snap a picture of this. Keep these people's information handy because they are both a huge, valuable asset for us to have in our business. So we're going to go through some good stuff, and we're going to talk about the difference between sales price and appraised value. right? And how do appraisers come up with this, right? And where does this come from? And what is this formula, right? And I think we've heard in the past is an appraisal is an opinion of value, right? But I want to just kind of get some feedback. Whoops, why is it not going? Feedback from Zena and from Ralph in regards to what do you look for when comparing a property, right? Like, what are the main things that you look at? Do you look at other offers? Do you look at supply and demand? Like, Zena, what are your top couple of bullet points that jump out at you that you really look at when you're looking at comps, like comping a property?
Right. Well, first of all, when I do my research and I start kind of like with certain parameters within that neighborhood, when I look at a property, so within a 1 mile radius, within 15 to 20% of gross living area, just to kind of like get a better picture of the market, what it's looking like for that particular property. And then, I go through the list, I look at the most recent comps. The sales price in the first instance is not, obviously it's a data point, but that's not the major thing I look at. So really truly what are the recent and close by comparables that are within a certain range. So if I have a property that's 1,000 square feet, I typically don't look at 2,000 or over 2,000 square foot properties for that, because it has to be comparable.
Got it. So is there a certain percentage, like, because I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, since we have a Zoom chat room, guys, and when I say guys, I mean Zena and Ralph. I'm going to play the realtor devil's advocate today, okay? Because what is the Ralph, what is the realtor devil advocate question right here? Like, what if there's no comps, Ralph? But there's nothing out there. Do you go outside of the area, or like, like
in that voice?
that's the way that was my realtor question voice, in case you're wondering. But right, like so that's the big question, right? You want to stay within a certain parameter, square footage and location, but like for Ralph, like what happens if there's limited data? Then
I actually love it.
Are you more likely to go out or bigger in size, or kind of what happens? Like, how do you look at it?
The answer is yes and yes. I love when there's limited data, because if people always say, well, there's no data to support it, there's also no data to disprove it either. So, you have to be a professional and a lot of times think outside the box, especially if you're doing unique, one-of-a-kind properties. So yes, ideally, you want to use these parameters of the 1 mile and, 3 months and so forth. But I do appraisals in Avalon, Catalina. I go back 5 years. I'm just working one for a client right now that he wants an appraisal value from 1978. The parameters are meant for you to avoid going outside to get a value that isn't supported by the neighborhood, the market area, if you will. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to compare apples and apples. You want to start off, again, for conversation purposes, with your neighbor, and then start expanding as necessary. The two ways we're allowed to expand is in time and in distance, and they both carry with it their own challenges. If you're in a market that's either increasing or decreasing, then you're going to have to account for that in your time adjustments. If you're going into a different market area, if you say you're going 3 miles out, then is that market area similar price index? So the farther you expand, the less credible the opinion of value, because there's a lot of uncertainties that are present. I always look at, if it's a sale, how many offers. If you got 30 offers, obviously somebody likes it. If you got no offers and it's been on the market for 9 months, okay, well, let's find out why. It's the process. You have to basically look at the whole thing, and you have to adjust for all the parameters out there. There's something called being overdeveloped. I've done so many properties where the person went way above and beyond what's reasonable for that market area. I did a house in Pomona where the market area was 400,000. He spent 500,000 on the pool. Well, it was a beautiful pool, but you went above and beyond what's reasonable. Versus Beverly Hills, that could be probably on the lower end. So you've got to know the market, you got to know the buying public, you got to know the parameters. So all that goes into play.
Got it. Great answer. Miss Zena, so there's a question here from Amy. Or first Mario said, "Hey, the realtors don't talk like that." That was me, Mario. I said that. I won't let Ralph fall on the sword for that one. That was Joe, unfortunately. Clearly a joke. Clearly a joke, Mr. Mario. But question here from Amy: what do you do when you have a home that is drastically older and not updated to the immediate neighborhood? How do you comp that? So, Zena, what would you say?
Yeah, again, it's kind of the same what what Ralph just said too. You just like you can expand the parameters how like if needed. And then if you have to go back in time, right, or you have to go to a different neighborhood. I mean, there's so many examples of situations where, like they're yeah, the condition, is not up to par with what the neighborhood currently reflects, but there is always going to be a comp to
Yeah.
compare this to, right? You just kind of have to find it, and get to that level. But that's where also adjustments come in. You find comps, okay, they're better in condition, but they're on the same street, right? That is a really
Hmm.
good comp. You should use it, and then adjust for the condition differences. But then for the most part, you will have to find again that one comp at least that is in a similar condition to show, to bracket that aspect of things and show the support for the adjustment that was made to reflect the better or worse condition.
Or worse condition. Yeah. I think that's a great answer. And you guys, yeah, everybody's going to hear a lot of similar things, from Ralph and Zena in regards to like my favorite thing about doing this is it depends, right? Because there's a lot of it depends. There's a lot of like, when you're looking like Ralph said the pool. Well, yeah, a pool in, I don't know, let's say Lakewood for $500,000 is different than a pool in Beverly Hills for $500,000, right? So like location, same thing. We're going to talk about ADUs a little bit later. Those values are a little bit different depending on area and what that market looks like. So there's a lot of it depends. But again, you can get an idea of, the appraiser's looking at all the data. Market value, Ralph, you mentioned other offers, supply and demand, trending material. Cool, we touched on some of that. And if anybody, again, has more questions, there we go. Bobby comes in with the question. How do you determine adjustments or pricing of value of things? Is there a set value point of a pool, etc.? And Tom says cost does not equal value. So do one of
Yeah.
you guys want to answer that as far as
Yeah,
adjustments?
the pool is actually a great example because I can give you several examples where a pool will lower the value of the house. For example, if you have a very small yard and you put a pool, now you compromise the use of the pool, the safety, the factor. Agents regularly tell me if the house didn't have a pool, it would lower the value. If you're in a lower income area where the maintenance is an issue, a lot of the homes I do in lower income area, the pool is green, they can't afford to maintain it. Let's go to the other extreme, Palm Springs. If you don't have a pool, you can't give it away. So you have to go case by case. If I'm appraising a house with a pool, I'm going to do the best I can to use all comps with a pool. That way, I don't have to worry about an adjustment for the pool because that's a really unique perspective. Um, there isn't a set. There's some technique in our industry called pair sales analysis. What means is you look at other properties, and let's say, for example, you look at three homes, and one's 1,000 square foot, one's 1,300 square foot, and one's 900 square foot. But the 900 is completely remodeled versus the other two that are bigger, and one has a pool, one doesn't have a pool. When you take out the other factors and you're left with the pool, then that's what the market will pay for a pool. Um,
Mm.
I personally I try to stay away from generic like 5,000, 10,000 for a bedroom or a bath. I use percentages. And if you get enough of a group of sales and you study it, you'll find out that there's going to be a certain percentage that people will pay for a bedroom, that people will pay for square footage, especially with COVID. With COVID, a lot of people working from home. The difference between a 2 and 3 bedroom and a 3 and 4 bedroom home is exponential because, hey, people use that extra room as an auxiliary room, as an office, what have you. So you can't just put a generic number. Just like a bathroom, if you have a one bath home, you can't really compare it to a two bath home because the cost, if the floor plan would even allow you to add that second bath, would be exponential. And
Mm-hmm.
anybody who lives in a one bath home knows the value of that second bath. So the first thing you want to do is to compare as much as possible apples and apples. So if you have a 2-bath home, stay with 2 baths. Don't use a 1 bath and just put a generic number, because the person that would buy a 2-bath home would never look at a 1-bath home.
Yeah.
And same thing, someone that wants a pool would never look at a house without a pool and then do that. So you want to study the market, look at enough of a control group, and then from there you deduct the numbers to come up with the price. In my particular case, it's usually a percentage.
Got it. No, that's great breakdown there, Ralph. I appreciate it.
You know,
Um,
I wanted to add something to that because yeah, exactly. It's the percentage part, like in looking at like the paired sales analysis, that's like in a perfect world, right? Because like pretty much identifying like one particular feature where a property differs to another, obviously possible, but you know, you have to most of the time adjust for other things first and then figure out, okay, what is that particular value coming down to? So what I like to do and how I usually start is like with the hard factors, like gross living area, you know, garage count, like things that are more quantifiable, I guess, at first, and then it comes together because like if you look at like a view factor, right, like that is a very specific adjustment based
mhm.
on the particular view, based on the neighborhood, based on, I mean, I've done appraisals where the view actually didn't add any value because it was so like the whole neighborhood essentially, like it's just a view neighborhood. So pretty
Yeah.
much property has a view. So when you hear like, oh, this is $1 million view, well, no, you know, it's
Yeah.
it's very dependent, um, again, on that specific situation. But I personally find it, you know, a good way to start is like with those like bath counts, you know, garage, gross living area, and then just work your way from there. But yeah, the percentage factors, I mean, because you do see like if it's like, especially if it's like comes down to like small amounts, right? Like for a fireplace, for example, those are like adjustments, in my opinion, that might be harder to justify in a lot of cases.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting um, how many factors there are, right? That really do affect everything. Um, oops, they let them in. I know there was a question here in regards to lots. I don't know if you guys do vacant land at all. Sal
I
had a
do.
question about vacant
Yeah.
land. Um, how would you price a lot? I'm not sure of the question, Sal. You may have to give me some more details. Price a lot in a neighborhood where there are no vacant lots, and the only available lots are in excess of 5 miles. So, like, how would you do a lot if there's nothing close by? I guess either one of you want to take that on?
Yeah, so again, that one I wouldn't use distance. I would use time. I'd go back 10, 15, 20 years sometimes and just see what that is, and then compare that time frame with another one in that same time frame and then adjust that same percentage. So let's say, for
Mhm.
example, I find 3 sales from 7 years ago. Then I'll compare those vacant lots with something else that sold 7 years ago. And let's just say that there's just for conversation purposes, there's a 19% premium for that. Then I would adjust the 19% premium in today's standards, and then you have a quantifiable number. When you start going into 5 miles for vacant lot, you start getting into, again, we're just talking generic purposes. A lot of times you can get a brand new construction. So if a property was brand new construction, then obviously the property was sold for land value.
Mhm.
That's another way. But keep in mind that you've got the entitlements and the permits and all that other factor. So it all depends on what you're going to do with the land. But that's a complicated appraisal. That wouldn't be a simple appraisal.
Gotcha. And then we'll touch on one more question here is the um, in regards, Edwin had a question in regards to home feature. Which home feature adds the most value in your opinion? Is it, which feature is it? Is it the location? Is it the kitchen? Is it the bedrooms, bathrooms, formal outdoor kitchen? Like, do you guys have any take on that?
Absolutely. And it goes back to your famous quote, it depends. um, if you're in Norco, I think I'm the only appraiser that appraised a house in Norco without horse stalls. So, you have to be able to be consistent with the neighborhood. You want to conform with the market area. I did a house and it was interesting because it was the house I praised. There was another house right across the street. And the one I appraised, the gentleman spent almost $200,000 remodeling the house on everything except for the kitchen and the bath. And he had like a commercial grade roof, commercial grade electrical, gas, plumbing, everything. But you go in, the kitchen and bath were original. Across the street, the person literally used IKEA and he got more out of it. So the features are, you want to be able to look at what the buying public looks at. If you're going to, I did another house recently where the person spent $120,000 remodeled the kitchen, but they used a style that was from 7 years ago. So
Mm.
yeah, you spent it, but nobody has granite anymore. Nobody uses. Now it's all Caesar stone or what have you. So not only is it putting money,
Formica? Did they throw some Formica
it's
in there? Make it
exactly, and it
look,
was interesting. And he
make
showed
it
me
pop?
receipts for everything, and he showed me not like I don't doubt it, but that's stuck in time. So you have to be able to be consistent with the current time. You have to be able to understand who your buying public is. If you're in a higher end neighborhood, you can't be using IKEA with all due respect. You have to use Brazilian teak, custom stuff, and vice versa. If you go above and beyond what's reasonable for another market, then you're not going to get the returns. The condition, the quality, and consistency with the current time and appropriate for the market is probably the best way I would answer that.
Gotcha. Okay.
I
I like that. Tina?
I would like to add to that in regards of the quality. If you look at like flips, for example, I mean, usually those are up to standard or like, very modern, what's like currently, I guess, trending, you would say. However, and like that's like the best I can explain it. And like my supervisor, when I first started with the appraisal stuff, he always used that, and that kind of phrase stuck with me. It's like lipstick on a pig. Like
Mm-hmm.
walk in there, and on first glance, like the photos look amazing, right? But then you walk in there and you see actually the quality of that remodel. And yeah, it's up, it's like trendy right now, but it is not necessarily reflective of a higher value. Like if you have a remodel that was done by the owner and that might not be like completely, like everything is gray, and everything is, a certain way, that might still be a higher value, than like a current one in that regard. But like in a general thing, and there's always those like very specific situations, but generally
Mm-hmm.
it is condition, right? Like
Yep.
how whole property as a whole, like the kitchen, like the bathrooms, the floors, the curb appeal, like just the whole condition.
Yep.
How, yeah.
Got it. There's some good specific scenarios in here. I'll see if I can run back to them. If I don't get back to them, for example, Ruth and Selvin and Terry, if I don't get back to them, I will email them over to Zena and Ralph and get you an answer. But we'll just kind of keep on, and then I'll circle back for sure. So let's kind of run through a little bit more. Ordering an appraisal. Big question that we get, because obviously, when you're in a multiple offer situation, you have to shorten contingency periods. The big question is, when can a lender order an appraisal, right? And a lender can order an appraisal as soon as a contract comes in, right? Most lenders wait until disclosures are signed. So, for example, if a offer gets accepted over the weekend, you all open escrow on Monday, technically that lender can order the appraisal on Monday, right? The difference is most lenders will wait until disclosures are signed. So escrow deposit goes out, they get fees from escrow. You could be looking at Wednesday or Thursday before the appraisal is ordered. And the reason that most lenders don't do that is because the lender can't charge the borrower for the appraisal until the disclosures are signed. So a lot of lenders don't want to take the risk. This is an important question for listing agents to ask. If you get an offer and it has a short appraisal contingency, well, then you should talk to that lender and make sure, like, when are you ordering the appraisal? Because if you're waiting for escrow to be opened and fees and disclosures signed, you're not going to meet those contingencies, right? You want to make sure that is a thing on the listing side. And if you're working with the buyer too, and you're putting certain contingencies in the contract, ask that lender, especially if you haven't worked with the lender in the past, right? People are going online.com to find a lender, and you might be working with the guy in Texas, Kentucky, Kansas, wherever it is, and they don't know, Rancho Cucamonga. They don't know what the turn times are in Riverside, San Bernardino, whatever county. You want to make sure that you know when are you ordering the appraisal, and then what's the turnaround time, right? Like Zena, we have Ralph, like they're on my appraisal panel, right? Like they're in the Soto circle of trust. So we know we have good, solid appraisers, but we order it the second the contract comes in. We don't wait for disclosures to come out because we know we have really, really, really tight timelines. So we want to make sure that is going to get done in a timely manner. So make sure you're having that conversation with your lenders, whether you're a listing agent or a buying agent. Different types of appraisals. So really quick question on the different types of appraisals. There are a lot of people ask about FHA versus conventional versus VA. So I'll ask you guys, Ms. Zena and Mr. Ralph, like, are FHA appraisals harder or worse than conventionals? Do you use different comps for some of those? Like, that's always the fear, right? Like, if I accept this FHA offer, appraisal is going to be a problem. What are your guys' quick take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I personally, I don't do VA appraisals, but I do FHA, and it has nothing to do with value or what kind of comps are being used. It is truly the part of the inspection that is just like the three words: sound, safe, secure, are always like on the top for FHA. And I mean, I can go into the specifics. It's just the inspection is different to a convention. Yeah.
But as far as using different comps, like, is there a different set of rules?
No.
Okay. Ralph, what do you think?
I actually work for HUD directly. So yeah, the inspection is absolutely right. However, Fannie Mae has changed their guidelines recently. So the reality is, for the most part, the inspection is almost the same for both conventional and FHA. I mean, you got to do the attic, the cross face, but other than that, it's almost the identical, and the guidelines are almost identical. So as far as the inspection itself, they're almost identical. The difference is there's some wording that goes into the report, but as far as the technicalities, it's identical report, same comps, same adjustments, same everything.
Got it. How about, I know termite we know isn't a requirement typically for FHA. It is a requirement for VA. VA is going to require termite clearance, full clearance. And how about appliances? I know that's always a question, right? Like, do you need a stove? Do you need to have heat? Do you need to have gas, water? Like, how do the appraisals look at that, right? Versus FHA versus conventional or whatnot.
I mean, that goes for, you just have to have, like, if you look at it from a standpoint, it has to be like a livable space, right? And with that comes, yeah, like a kitchen that has a cooking appliance. It has to have heat. I mean, in Southern California, obviously that is a little different than if you were in the Midwest, but still heat is required.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
always need to have a heat source, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so to expand on what she says, it has to be safe. If you got a broken window, that becomes a health and safety factor. If you have a leak, you have a roof that doesn't work. So like she said, it has to be in a living standard.
Mm-hmm. How about a stove? I feel like I get asked about a stove all the time. There's two different ones I get asked. I get asked about a stove. Does this property have to have a stove? And I get asked about a pool. Like, does the pool have to have water? Does the pool have to be working? Like, what's the deal with the pool? If I had $1 for every time somebody asked me those, what do you guys? What's the rule on pools and stoves?
Pool's the same thing. Yeah, if the pool is empty, that's obviously a safety hazard, right? Because someone could fall and whatnot. So yeah, and then the stove. What do you mean, like so?
Like, does it have to have a working stove, or if there's no stove, do they have to put one in, or can the gas line just be kept?
No. So then there needs to be a stove. It goes along the lines of, like, if you're in a kitchen without a stove, it is essentially it needs to be there.
Well, the rule is that if it's a built-in stove, if the house came with a built-in stove, then yes. But if it's one of those where it's personal, you can take it in and out as long as it's working. As far as the pool, if there's no water, then you have to have a permanent cover. So Yeah, and so those are the two big ones. How you address that?
Permitted cover. I haven't seen a
Permanent?
permitted
No, not
cover.
permitted. Permanent.
Permanent. Okay, I was like permitted.
No, no,
Permanent
permanent.
cover. Yeah.
Yeah,
Back when every home was a foreclosure, I remember seeing like all the bank repos, all the pools were empty, and they would have like these big contraptions built over the
yeah,
pools.
yeah.
It was like they'd have like the metal and then the wood, and I was like, wow, like this is a whole thing going on here. Um, cool. So we touched on both of those. If anybody has any questions about like specific like that, you could throw them in the chat. The other thing I didn't you mentioned health and safety issues, right? I think that's an important thing. People ask, like you mentioned broken glass or broken windows, like that's going to come up for FHA or conventional,
Exactly.
right? A broken
Yeah,
window is a
yeah.
broken window. That's a hazard. Same thing with rails on stairs, right? Like that's a safety issue if the stairs or if there's missing stairs, like walking out of the back of the house and there's no steps, like that's a problem, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
A little bit. I just heard handrails and, but yeah, if
Yeah,
Rob.
like I know, like I had a client that they had stairs going up to the second floor, but there was no railing, and I was like, hey, dude, what happened to the stair rail? He's like, I'm replacing it. I'm putting wrought iron. I go, well, you have nothing. This was on a refinance. He literally had no railing. And we're like, well, you got to put in a railing, buddy. That's a problem. Like that's a hazard, Like somebody could just fall down the stairs. There was nothing.
Absolutely.
He literally had nothing there, and I was like, oh boy, like you think you've seen it all, right? Like, are you doing any construction in your house? He's like, no. Well, it's not construction. It's just a new rail.
Same
Um,
second story deck. I've had that where there's no rail on there either. So obviously, again,
yeah,
that's a safety issue. So everything that could be a safety issue, health issue is going to be an issue.
The
gotcha.
rule of thumb I use is use children and the handicap as reference. So, if a child goes up to the balcony that she said without a rail, is there a legitimate chance that something could happen? Yes. So then, you use that. As far as walking out with someone that is limited in walking ability, would they be able to fall? Yes. Okay. So then I would probably act accordingly.
Gotcha. Couple of quick questions here. Does the blah blah blah? Does the pool equipment have to be functional? Do you give any value to well-groomed yards, right? As far as like just well kept. Somebody asked about clean homes. Like, is there more value if the home's cleaner versus dirtier, smelly versus non-smelly? So, what are your thoughts on those two, pool equipment and then the condition, like smell or quality or cleanliness of a home, inside or out? Any value on that?
I mean, the way I when I go to inspections, people usually say, "Oh, I'm sorry, so sorry, it's not clean or not tidy or whatever." The way I look at it is, I kind of put on like my glasses of, I look at it as if it were empty, right? So like if it's not like cleaned up in a sense of like regular clean, that doesn't matter at all, right? Like then we get though into the same with smell, but we do get into a situation. I did a appraisal where it smelled like a rodent in like rodent droppings. So you had this like really weird smell in there. So obviously there's like an underlying issue um, that yeah that needs to be addressed because again that could be a health or safety issue. But if it's like a regular uncleanliness, if that makes sense. Um, no, but again, then there is like potential, like there's discoloration on the walls that could be a potential mold situation. So we'd have to like look at, is it normal, I guess, in a sense, or
Mm-hmm.
imply like a deeper issue,
If there's
right?
more
Which then
to
I
it.
would flag it. I'm not a home inspector. I'm not going to be saying, okay, like this is what's going on. I'm just going to report it, and
Yeah,
then there, yeah.
Yeah,
got
to
it.
add to what she's saying, we appraise a house as if it's vacant. On a refi is not a big deal, but on a sale, the smell and all those factors, they're going to affect by the offers you're going to get. So the buyers are going to tell you by their purchasing dollar whether that factor is an issue. If you have a house that is not well maintained, you're not going to get the top dollar offer. If
Mm-hmm.
a house has compromising smell, you're probably not going to get top dollar. So the buying public will make their decision for you based on their purchasing dollar.
Got it. Good call. Um, cool. Let me see if I caught anything else. Electrical wall heating unit. Um, electrical wall unit that's plugged into a standard outlet, is that allowed? Or does it have to be a GFI? Don't know what that question is there, Edgar. Everything else looks good. Okay, next we're going to touch on permits and ADUs. So another big topic in regards to appraising properties. Are permits required to be livable space? What is the take on that, Ms. Zena or Ralph or
Sorry,
both?
it keeps breaking up a little bit.
Oh.
So we're at the AD stage. Okay. So permit essentially, in my experience, it depends on the lender. I work with some lenders that require permits for pretty much everything. But if you look at it, it depends on the neighborhood. Like you have in my area, you have certain neighborhoods where there is a fair amount of unpermitted additions, conversions, and they surely have value in that neighborhood. So if the market shows you that there is value, then that's what we look at and that's what we analyze. And then required to be counted as livable space, that goes back to, ADU is an accessory, so it has fully, it has to have a kitchen, a kitchenette. It has to have like a living, cooking, bathroom, what you would expect of a living space.
Um, so,
So
go ahead, Ralph.
yeah, so to add to what she's saying, there's appraisal guidelines and there's lender's guideline. She's absolutely right. At the end of the day, it's the lender's money. They're going to give you the guidelines, but I'm going to share with you what the appraisal guidelines are. The appraisal guidelines, FHA and Fannie Mae recently loosened up a lot on their requirements for unpermitted features. And there's a big distinction between unpermitted and illegal. If something is illegal, we cannot appraise it. We can't do anything. However, it's unpermitted, then that's where I'm going to share the information. The definition of an unpermitted feature is one that it conforms with the guidelines of the city. They just never went through the permit process. And there's two terms that I'd like for you to remember going forward with regards to unpermitted is market acceptance and market reaction. What does that mean? Market acceptance means, is it common in that particular market area for properties to have unpermitted features? Market reaction is there a history of people paying a premium for that feature? So if you're in a particular market area where it's very common to have unpermitted features and properties with unpermitted features get a premium, then under Fannie Mae and HUD guidelines, we are supposed to give value to that. However, again, the golden rule in real estate, the one that has the gold makes the rules, and the lender has the gold. So we can have an appraisal that's consistent with appraisal guidelines, but the lender says, no, our guidelines is you need to have permits. So at the end of the day, it's really important to understand what the guidelines are of the lenders, because in many cases, they're inconsistent with appraisal guidelines.
Yeah, I think that's valid because I've had a couple of clients, and not to throw anybody under the bus, but I've had a couple of closings over the last couple of years where the client was getting a loan with the credit union, and the credit union was a little bit more conservative with regards to ADUs and buildable space. And we had one situation where the credit union wanted the client to remove the kitchen portion of the ADU. They didn't like that it had an ADU. It was really weird. So you got to make sure that you know who the lender is as well. But getting into the ADUs, how do you value an ADU, right? So I had a buddy of my daughter's soccer team reach out to me, and he's like, we just spent $250,000 on an ADU for my mother-in-law's house, and we got it appraised, and the appraiser only gave him $50,000 in value. And I was like, that sounds about right? Like, you're not going to get, I saw somebody comment earlier, right? Money spent doesn't equal value, right? If you spend $250, it's not going to give you $250 in value. So how do you guys value an ADU, right? Let's say fully permitted, it's good. You verified all of that. How would you, let's say, do an ADU in an area where there's lots of ADUs and maybe in an area where there's not a lot of ADUs? We'll play devil's advocate on both. Ralph or Zena?
Okay. Okay, I was going to go for Zena. The trend has been she goes first. So
Good, go for it.
You go,
okay.
Rob.
Okay, perfect. So ADUs are really market specific. And it's really as far as the money spent, that's not necessarily true because if you spend money in a pool in Palm Springs, you will get your money back. If you spend money in Palmdale for a pool, you won't. So it's market specific. I've done ADUs in Santa Monica where the ADU is worth $2 million. However, that same ADU in Huntington Beach, not so much.
Hmm.
So it's really market specific. You have to know that area. And it's really important because if you and I just did one in Mission Viejo where the person just spent $250,000 and it was in a market area where literally you're the only ADU.
Hmm.
Um, so you have to know if you're going to spend that kind of money, at the very least, do some due diligence and find out if this particular market area supports that feature and if there's a premium that people pay for that feature. Just because you paid for that, it doesn't necessarily make that much sense. If you're in an area, maybe by a university, where that ADU can be rented out, or there's some additional income or some other features, then that would work. But yeah, it's got to be market specific.
Yeah, and again, Zena and Ralph are great resources for something like that, right? If you have a client who's building an ADU and they're not sure, like again, reach out to Zena, reach out to Ralph, say, hey, can you do an appraisal on this and give my client an idea of like what does it look like? Is it normal in this area? I'm sure that's something that they can handle for you, because
Absolutely.
you want to get it from an expert. A couple of quick things that came up. Alicia asked if a shed that is used as office space but is not permitted can be used as value. I'm going to say it can't be added value because it's a shed and it's not a structure. But Sina, what do you think about a shed that was converted to an office space?
That also comes down to, again, the market. Like, I've seen areas and also how it's like truly built out. Like, is it truly like you walk into,
If it's a Rubbermaid, what do you
yeah,
think?
yeah, feel like you walk into a shed, right, that has a desk in it, or is it something where like it truly feels like a bonus room, right? Like a deep
Yeah.
space where, yeah, there is, electricity, there might even be, AC. So it depends on that, right?
That's so funny. I went to like a Rubbermaid shed because that's what I have in my yard. But you're right, because if it's built out and it looks good, maybe, and it's common for the area, that looks good. There you go, Alicia. It looks good. It looks like a craftsman house and feels like a bedroom. Just no bathroom. So I think it depends on the area, right? Zena, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do use them as, from what I've seen, kind of like a home office type of situation. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're in an area where, let's say, that is not really an amenity that people look for, like, pay a premium for, like you can tell, by the comps, like if it's like written in, you look around for that. Yeah, you can definitely tell by the comps in that area if there is a premium that people are willing to pay.
Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah. To add to what she says, keep
Yeah.
in mind that we're held to a higher standard. Everything we give value to has to be supported.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an outlier, it might be a great feature and it might add value, but if we can't find data to support an adjustment, then we really can't give a value because it would be it would be I could put a comment in the report, say, hey, look, this property has this feature, it's a great feature, it could possibly add value, but there's not enough data for me to give you an actual money amount to that.
Mm-hmm. Got
Something
it.
add to the whole ADU topic, and I mean that's a very wide topic that we could probably talk about for a long time. But what I do see a lot when I do appraisals that have like ADUs, people use that term ADU very loosely. ADU has a very specific definition, right? So it's an accessory dwelling unit, and kind of what I said before, there has to be a kitchen, something where you can like independently live in and cook, right? And so a lot of times there is, let's say there is like a bonus structure, there's a casita, there's like some kind of dwelling that has a bedroom and a bath. That's not an ADU, right? So we have to look at it from that standpoint of, because if we're looking at a neighborhood where, like, let's say like it is like a college area, right, where something like this is rented, it also like comes down to access to that space, right? But ADU
Mm-hmm.
has a definition that is very important in that regard. And
Everything's an ADU nowadays, Zena. Everything. My
yeah,
converted garage,
yeah,
my shed, my we put an easy up in the backyard, and like that's an ADU. Everything's an ADU. Every person I talk to, like, oh, there's an ADU. I'm like, but this is not an ADU.
And to add one other thing, to a lot of marketers, listing agents will market a house in a garage that can be easily converted to an ADU, and it's really important to know that market area because a lot of people, believe it or not, don't use their garage for car storage. So sometimes when you have a garage conversion, and the one thing that for whatever reason people always forget that when you convert your garage, you lose the use of the garage. Even
Yeah.
though it's common sense, people forget that, and it's like, okay, well, you've lost the use of the garage. But if it is you're in a market area where people don't really use the garage for car storage, then the value might be in converting that into usable space, whether it be living space or an accessory unit or a bonus room.
Mm-hmm.
right.
No,
And
so,
what
so true. Go ahead.
I really like to point out is, and it's a personal, I feel very passionate about this. ADUs are not part of the gross living area. And it takes so much time to filter through properties when appraising houses that do have an ADU because so many times agents just combine, right? So, like the ADU, all of a sudden, the house is like, let's say the house is 1,000 square feet with a 500 square foot ADU. So, all of a sudden, the house is 1,500 square feet. That is simply not how this works. And it makes the process of finding comparables so much harder because
Mm-hmm.
you then have to filter through, you have to, and that's part of it, of course, but it should it if there's one thing I could really like plead for is like to please at least put the information in the remarks of like how big the actual house and then the ADU is, because that
Yeah.
makes all the difference.
I've heard that from multiple appraisers over the years, where agents will list a house on the MLS as 2,000 square feet,
Yeah.
but it's really 1,600 plus a 400 ADU. And then you're looking for 2,000 square foot comps, and then the house doesn't appraise because it's really a 1,600 square foot house with an ADU, not a 2,000 square foot house. So everybody should write that down, or at least if you take home nothing else, that's definitely valuable. I'll touch on one more thing. I'll answer this question for Natalia, but Natalia said she had clients in Whittier. They converted the garage to an ADU. They went to refinance the house. One appraiser gave the ADU $50,000, and the other gave it $100,000. And she said, "Can you explain how this is possible?" And my answer would be opinion of value. But for you guys, like for Zena and for Ralph, like how does that happen? Like how does Zena say 100,000 and Ralph say 50? Like is there a formula behind that, or is it just opinion?
I mean, that might be a speculation because obviously I don't know. I haven't seen the reports, right? And so in that regard, I can't really speak to why exactly that happened. But I mean, one reason could be they used different comps that had, like, for that particular feature, different values. And again, it's like really hard to make that determination just on like, oh, that this is the scenario. Um,
That's
you know,
true. Different comps would affect.
yeah, like
Yeah.
if you exactly if you just like look at, let's say you have like two comps and you just look at those, what kind of Ralph said before, you just look at like one property with an ADU and the value in that particular case might have been 50,000, right? Like, and that is being used, that could explain why, that number came up with that. But then maybe if you look at more properties with ADUs, you are able to determine, or vice versa, right? Like you might be able to just narrow down the value more
Hmm.
than as like just comparing two properties. That would be my, I guess.
Got it.
She's absolutely right. We really
Yeah.
can't make a comment, make any distinction without seeing the reports. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what data they used to arrive at an opinion of value of the ADU. One person, their final conclusion was that the ADU, based on the data that they had, was 50,000. The other appraiser was 100,000. And without looking at the reports, I can't tell you what the difference is.
Got it. Okay, cool. Next, we're going to touch on solar panels. I'll try to keep us moving around to be cognizant of people's time. But solar panels are a pill. If you're dealing with an escrow with solar, You definitely want to make sure you get the solar paperwork going right away. That's my, lender tip. Um, but how do you guys value solar panels? Like everybody, paid off solar or solar on the house, or obviously it varies between, let's say, Palm Springs and Big Bear, right? Like two different markets for having solar panels. But what kind of value or what advice would you give our agents about how to advise their clients on what is the value of solar, and is there a difference between a leased solar and an owned solar? Ms. Dina?
So yeah, okay, I was waiting again. Yeah, so there definitely is solar panels have to be owned. The way I always go about it is I asked if it's a refi, for example. I asked the owners if like they were to move tomorrow if they could bring the panels, right? Because sometimes I ask if they're owned or leased and they say something that might not be factual. So like if again it has to be like in your
Owned panels.
owned panels, exactly. Um, and then yeah, as you said, right, it is again like it goes back to like the market specifics of
Mhm.
obviously the size of the system, right? What is the actual, I guess, output would be the word for that. Um,
Mhm.
in and like I've also seen situations where like the solar panels they that is technology that like so drastically also improved over like recent years. I've seen systems that were improving, they were old and kind of outdated, right? Like do they have the same value than the newer systems? Likely not, right? Because it's just like
Because
they're
it's changed.
yeah, right, exactly.
Got it.
As far as value, there's three scenarios that you should be aware of. The number one is the lease. Number two is the owned with a pending balance. And number three is owned with no balance. If it's leased, we cannot give it value because that's considered personal property. If it's owned with a pending balance, we can't give it value because it's not paid off. So the only one we can give value is if it's owned and it has no pending balance. And about 5, 6 years ago, when solar started coming in, it was very difficult to give value because there was not enough data. Moving forward to 2026, where a lot of houses do have solar, from an appraisal perspective, now we have quantifiable data. Typically, right now, the percentage on average, again, this is just generic, it's not market specific, but it kind of gives you a starting point. It's about a 25% of what you paid for, you're going to get in market appeal. General, obviously, Palm Springs, you're going to get more invest, but you can use that as a rough estimate.
Got it. So basically, to answer Sarah's question, if it's leased, you're not going to get value. If it's owned, you will get value as long as it's owned with no balance.
Exactly.
Right.
Hmm.
Got it. Okay. Cool. I would like to touch on that because everybody, you'll meet with a client. They go, "We have solar. It's worth this. We have an $85,000 contract that's going to get pushed on to the next owner." Right? They really don't. It's not valuable. Um, Next, we're going to touch on what helps an appraiser. So I'll ask you guys, should agents provide comps for you, when you come out to inspect the property? If so, what details are useful, and when should they give them to you? Um, Making sure you have water heaters, strapped, CO2s, make sure that that's always done. Unlocking the doors to all the rooms helps the appraisers. So I'll ask Ralph, I'll ask Zena, should the agents provide you comps? And then this one down here, I don't know if you can, well, you probably can't see it, but what is your biggest pet peeve when you go to appraise a house? Obviously, it doesn't affect your value, but what is the biggest pet peeve? And we'll stick with the ladies first. Zena, you're going to continue to go first.
So I always give agents the chance to send me comms. So whenever I reach out, I ask if they like to share any information or the sales that they used. I'd say the majority does provide them. And to me, it's just like it gives me again like another data point, like some more insight um, in that. I think like what's also important is if there's like any updates, right? Like if so, obviously for a sale, to have like a list of like the updates that were done, so it's just like easy to, to have that accounted for. Um, what you already said, like the water heater.
Biggest pet peeve.
Biggest pet peeve. Oh gosh. Um, I mean, like personally, I think like I've had this situation before where like I felt some kind of I don't know if animosity is like the right word, but like an attitude from agents like reaching out to them, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's kind of like a situation where they're trying to be. I don't know, but I've
Yeah.
had, yeah, it's just like, I'm not trying to working against anything. Like that's at least like sometimes the feel that I get, that it's kind of like,
The appraiser's the enemy of the
yeah,
state. Yeah.
exactly. And so like I don't really understand why. Because like again, to me, like we're in the same industry. Like I want to like I understand that. But I mean, like biggest pet peeves is it's really like more so not really when it comes to like the inspection, but like more so when I call agents up on information on the MLS. I mean, I've been hung up on. I've been like not gotten any replies. And so like if certain information is not in the MLS, right? Like going back to solar panels, like if they are owned, put that in the MLS, because then if I look at the property and I can use that, right, information, that's great. But if I then have to make a call and figure that out, that takes up everyone's time, right? And then like, yeah, that would be something where I'm definitely like what's
Yeah.
your pet peeve. But yeah, it's
Got it. Mr. Ralph, how about you? Comps and then biggest pet peeve.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, I take my profession very seriously, and I'd like to believe that the agents take their profession seriously. So, as a professional, we can discuss issues. The rule is we cannot discuss value and manipulation of value, which nobody does anyways. We're talking about professional. You're an agent, you got 15 offers, share that with me. I've done 25, 30,000 appraisal, but not on that area. So if that's your market area, you could tell me, hey, look, I know this area, that particular house sold for this much and so forth. So you're like she said, exactly, it's a data point. So absolutely share your professionalism, and everybody wins. Pet peeves, whenever I tell an agent to bring comps, just rule of thumb, just bring your three best comps. I hate when an agent just goes out, prints, and gives me 15 sales that are not even comparables. I go, here you go, and I'm like, okay, well, you took you 10 seconds to do that. So if you want to seriously provide sales data, just pick your three best ones and say, okay, here, these are my three best ones.
Got
also,
it. That's awesome.
I just thought about too. I would say also if it's a sale, just confirm the final sales price. I've had situations where like, because we as appraisers, we get the report and the contract. But I've had situations where it was an appraisal in like a very high value area here in San Diego. And there were two appraisals done and the values were very different, and then they came back, and what happened was essentially the other appraiser had used the contract that wasn't like up to date, so there was an addendum, and anyway, so just always confirm the final
Hmm.
price, because
Make
it's
sure make sure they have the right contract.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know. All right. Cool. Next, we're going to touch on PDRs and appraisal waivers. So PDRs, we're seeing more of online lenders using these non-traditional appraisals, right? Everybody's trying to save time. So a PDR is a property data report. And then, appraisal waivers, I'm getting more and more questions about appraisal waivers, right? Appraisal waiver is really decided by DU or LP when the lender runs it through their automated system. So there's no lender that can tell you, hey, can you waive the appraisal, right? It's literally Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac tell you when they will accept whatever XYZ value is. And there's different, mix of reasons why they do, whether it's the comps or the data or the down payment or the credit score. There's no lender, doesn't matter what bank, credit union, broker, direct lender can tell you, yeah, we can get a waiver on this, because it is truly up to DU and it is, or LP, and it is specific on that client's criteria. PDRs are something we're seeing, and I don't know if Ralph or Zena are seeing this, but PDR is a property data report, and some of the online lenders are using this where they're sending Joe Schmo, no pun intended, out to the client's house to take the photos of the house, but it's not an actual licensed appraiser, right? So they have licensed appraiser sitting at home. They send out some hourly employee to go to the house, take the pictures, send them to the appraiser, and then the appraiser will prepare the report. The thing with this, and you have to be careful of, oops, look at me moving my whole screen,
Mhm.
is that's not a licensed person coming to your house, right? That's an employee of a company that's just coming out there. So they're taking, I mean, we had one from, I don't want to say it was Rocket Mortgage, but it could have been. And they had taken 1,000 pictures of this person's house. I mean, everywhere of the house. Like you can tell clearly this person did not know how to do an appraisal because they were just everywhere. And the listing agent, who was a friend of mine, said, dude, this person that came, there was no way that they were a licensed appraiser. They were not professional at all. So another question that you can ask your lenders, especially when it's a lender you don't know, people, right? Like your client finds Joe Schmo lender online, you need to have a conversation with that lender and say, hey, are you going to send out a fully licensed appraiser to the home? Or are you using a property data report? Is somebody other than a licensed individual or one of their direct employees going to come to my client's house? Just to be really, really safe, right? It's supposed to be a quicker process. It's supposed to save some time. But again, your fiduciary responsibility is to protect the client, right? So you want to make sure that you have a licensed appraiser actually going to the house. The other thing I will touch on with appraisal waivers is if a client does waive the appraisal, us as the lender, we do get something in writing that says, hey, I chose to waive the appraisal and I'm accepting this value. I tell my agents that they should also send the client an email and say, hey, you're buying this house. Bank of Joe did not require an appraisal. I just want to confirm you were okay with not getting an appraisal. Get something in writing on your end as well, because the last thing you want is, they go to sell in a year and the value went down. And they're going to blame you and go, well, when we bought the house, it was lower. You just told me not to get an appraisal, right? You want to make sure that you're not painting yourself into a corner. So again, just CYA on some of that stuff. With regards to appraisals, we'll run through a low appraisal scenario, right? So but when we talk about appraisals coming in low, it's always a thing, right? If anybody's ever had an appraisal come in low, I will tell you I've done this presentation many, many times, and I will kind of speak for Ralph and for Zena, but when they have a contract and it shows $1 million sales price, and they're submitting an appraisal and they're sending it in at 975, they know there's a good likelihood that somebody's going to come back at them pretty pissed off, right? They are going to be very, very, solid with their number, knowing that a rebuttal's coming back, knowing that somebody's going to challenge it, right? So you have to know from the appraiser standpoint that when they submit that and they know they didn't hit the value, they've done everything humanly possible to try to hit that value. They're not out there going, ha, 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 I'm going to teach Daniel Gonzalez a lesson, and it's going to come in low, right? Like Zena, Ralph, like, would you agree with that comment and from that standpoint when you know it's not coming in?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That is exactly the right point that you made, right? Like that is obviously objectively we're there to put an opinion of market value out there, but obviously in the back of the mind, if something like that happens, yeah, you're already, that something is probably going to come back, and which is fine, like the reconsideration of value process has its place. And if that's why also it goes back to like looking at the sales that were used. That's why I do that. Look at the sales that were used to come up with the sales price, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what Ralph also said before, like how many offers were there? And yeah, I mean, sometimes, there are situations where it comes in lower, unfortunately.
Yep. Yep. 100%. What sources do you guys use to get comps? Are you mostly pulling MLS, or do you use other sites like Parcel Quest? That was a question that was on here.
Yeah, the MLS.
Gotcha. Okay,
Well, we're
cool.
supposed to keep in mind, we're supposed to verify everything from at least a minimum of two sources. Parcel Quest is essentially county records, which is nice, but you need to complement that with the MLS or talking to agents, which happens a lot where you'll see title will show, hey, this property's two bedroom, one bath. MLS will say three bedroom, two bath. There was an addition that was done that was never final, not finalized, but never shows on title, even though it's all permitted. So you always want to make sure that you use complementary data. One of the things that I do is not only do I call the agents of all the comps that I use, but I call the agents of the comps that I don't use. And a lot of times I get more information from the agent of a comparable that I didn't use. So, going back to your question as far as the value coming down, typically my reports are pretty pretty thorough, and a lot of times I'll put comment in there already addressing the rebuttal. So if I already know what you're going to come at me with, I already address it in the report.
Mm-hmm.
So we pretty much, like you said, we do everything we can to provide an opinion of value that is supported by data. On sales, the market has usually spoken because someone has actually, even though in theory they're not going to hold a house for 30 years, they've made a commitment for 30 years. On a refi, it's a little different because you're motivated by what you need for the loan. You're not motivated by the market.
Yeah. 100%. A couple of good questions in here where Sarah had asked about below grade living area. I've had a couple of below grade living areas and basements. How are those valued? I know how they look at them in out of state properties, but do you guys value below grade or basements at all?
Well, I
Well,
mean,
I do a lot. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, see, I do a lot of work in Portland, Oregon, and I've done stuff in Cleveland, Ohio, where the basement's huge. So having a basement is significant. Here in Southern California, mainly what you have is what's called a California basement, which is really more an extension of a storage. You go
Mm-hmm.
underneath and you use it. The hot water heater is usually found there. So typically, again, any value you have that's outside of the norm has to be supported by data, and you're going to be hard pressed to find data that shows a market appeal for a California basement.
And so you probably wouldn't give it any square footage, huh?
No, it wouldn't be part of square footage. It's an added feature.
Yeah.
And again, there are some that are finished that are nice, but that's really not the norm. And again, if you don't have enough data to support that, you're going to have a hard time giving an opinion of value.
Yeah, I do a lot of deals on the East Coast where basements are super, popular and definitely more desirable, but there's a difference between a finished basement and unfinished basement. Typically, they don't add it to the square footage like the ADU. There's value there, but again, it's more common, in that tri-state area. I do a lot of New York, New Jersey, Washington, that Washington D.C. that area. It's more common for sure.
Then,
Let me add one more thing to that real quick. If you go to Big Bear, for example, where a lot of the properties are built below grade, you drive up and then you go down.
Hmm.
Then again, and I had an extensive conversation with the reviewer from HUD about this. If it's common in the area and the market pays a premium for that feature, then again, market acceptance and market reaction, you have to give that feature value.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I just saw one of those listed, and you're right. Went all the way up these stairs, and then the house kind of went down. Um, Tom had asked about the new Fannie Mae, the changes on the UAD, and the new forms that are coming out later this year. I haven't seen anything rolled out on the lending side for it. I don't know if you guys have seen anything about new forms and any of that coming at the end of the year. I think it's like November, December, or something like that. Have you guys seen anything on that yet?
I mean, from what I've heard, it because like we're talking like since last year, actually, right? Those are supposed to be coming out, but I think the timeline has just been like pushed back and back. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I personally haven't received a request on those
Yeah,
forms, and I doubt it's going to be anytime soon in like the coming weeks. So yeah, it's
yeah, it's
The
coming.
one
We
thing
just
that
don't know all the details yet, right?
the one thing that the consumer is not going to be happy about, it's almost twice as long. So obviously the appraisal price is going to be higher. So if they're complaining about the appraisal fee now, they're probably going to be really unhappy when they come out because it's very extensive. So keep that in mind.
Got it. Ray had asked about getting the report out fast. Should the appraiser get the appraisal out fast if they know time is of the essence? I mean, appraisers are going to work fast to get the appraisers out. I think it comes back to that what we said earlier about the lender ordering the appraisal. Sometimes appraisers get painted in a corner, right? Like a lender waits a week to order the appraisal, and then by the time it gets assigned, it's 10 days, and it's a 14-day contingency, and so everybody's barking at the appraiser, but if you look in the mirror, the lender should have ordered the appraisal 10 days earlier, right? It should have been assigned much sooner. So I'll defend the appraisers a little bit on this because I know that they move very, very quickly, and again, as long as there's comps that support it and there's data, they'll get it quick. I think most of the delays you see on appraisals, when you look at it, it's the lender. The lender usually waited too long to order it most of the time.
I was just gonna say I had an appraisal, actually, an order come in, and my due date was, let's say, it was Tuesday, and so when I set up the inspection, so it wasn't ordered as a rush. The agent told me that the contingencies are going to be removed on Monday. So I mean, obviously, I have no idea about this. And it was ordered really late and not even as a rush. So then it was turned into a rush, right? But this is like the communication I'm not aware of, right? So like when I receive an order, obviously, yeah, it's going to be done as quickly as possible. But if there's like an expedited timeline, I'm not aware of, right?
Yeah, most of the time it's the lender's fault. I'll fall on the sword for the lenders. We're going to continue to go through some questions and stuff here. I'll catch up on some of the questions. If you want the slides, I will email them out. If you put your email in the chat, I will send them out to you via email. Or you can follow us on some of those things there. So let me kind of scroll through some of these questions as well, and I'll put my social on there as well. Multi-unit properties, are they valued less if they're on rent controls and being sold with tenants? Is the value of a unit less? Will it appraise for less if it's rent controlled or lower than market rents? That's a good question.
That's actually a great question. And the reality of the matter is vacant is gold. If you have a property that has
especially
a tenant,
in California,
if you have a tenant and they've been there for a while, you're going to really get a lower value because they can't leave. And so you can say you can't use market rent for a property that has a tenant that's a long-term tenant because that's not reality. If market rent's $4,000 and that person's paying $750 and they've been there for 15 years, you can't kick them out. So it's a very challenging appraisal when you've got tenants occupied that are below market rent because you're buying it for rent, and it's not like you can just kick them out or you can just raise the rent arbitrarily to market rent. So that is a very challenging appraisal. Then we have to try to find properties, which again, it's a challenge, that have long-term tenants, because if you have vacant property, then you're going to get the maximum because you're going to be paying current market rent.
Yeah. And also on that, I don't know how your experience is with that, Ralph, but what I see a lot on multifamily properties, especially on the MLS, again, there is like very few information in there that just like, for example, pertains to the leases, like, the breakdown of the units, the actual rent amounts. I would say challenging to get that information. So that obviously something that affects the timeline, right? Because you have to make sure all that is there. That's I experience a lot.
Yeah, that's so true. Good question. How about cul-de-sacs versus busy streets? Well, how does that affect value? And somebody asked about light poles. I know it's one of my wife's biggest pet peeves when we were looking for our last home. It's like we'd walk into the yard, and if she saw a light pole like with wires, she's like, "We're out." So how do you guys? What kind of value addition or hit do you take for any of those? Busy streets, cul-de-sacs, and electrical wires. What do you guys think about those, Mr. Ralph?
Yeah. So my opinion is all based on data. At the end of the day, if I'm on a cul-de-sac, I'm going to do my best to find properties on the cul-de-sac, and you'll see people will pay a premium for it. And at the end of the day, it's all based on what people will pay. In Corona Del Mar, interestingly enough, if you're closer to PCH, you're actually going to get more than if you're closer to the ocean because people like to walk there. So you have to take your opinions out and you understand that, hey, let me look at the data. If you're on a busy street, you want to compare with other properties on a busy street. And if you just want to find out what the difference is, look for a similar property that's not on a busy street. And then all things being equal, that's what people will pay for the busy street. In situations like that, I always try to compare apples and apples. So if I'm close to a busy street, I'll try to use something next to a commercial, next to a freeway, next to a school, next to a commercial area, next to railroad tracks. Something that's apples and apples that has, we call that an adverse external influence. And you also got to remember the motivation factor. If you're someone in a low income area, you're probably going to use public transportation. So you might want to be closer to an area where you have easier access to public transportation. So I just look at the data. I don't go in there with a predetermined opinion. I just, okay, let me look at this property. Let me look at the data. What does the data say? Okay, this is what the data presents.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I can agree with that, because if you look at, like, I've done properties that were like essentially sitting on top of the interstate, right? So you have like that noise, but essentially it didn't quite factor in as much as you might have thought because of other factors, and so like looking at other properties, it didn't have quite that effect.
I'll add view. Interestingly enough, everybody thinks an ocean view is the greatest view, except for people that live. Every time I do a house that has an ocean view, I have to ask the owner to send me a picture of the view because it's always June gloom. It's always gray. And they always tell me, who enjoys the view? My housekeeper enjoys the view, because I leave in the morning and there's June gloom, and I come back at night and it's black. So you have to look at the data. You have
That's
to look
funny.
at the data.
Yeah, that's great. Couple of other questions. There's a good AI question in here, but there was a question earlier from Ruth. In the case of a 1,500 square foot, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, so 1,500 to 1, and the closest comparables show 2 bedroom, 1 bath, but smaller, 1,100, 1,200 square feet. How would you comp that property? Would you go with square footage adjustment, or would you try to find bigger homes, further out? Assuming both, 2 bedroom, 1 bath. Going back to the comps. I'm going back on questions. Sorry, guys, if I'm jumping around a little bit.
That's okay.
No, I mean, if that were to come up as a comp, gross living area adjustment, yeah. Like, I mean, if it's like if it's like, let's say it is a couple streets over or on the same street, or it is within a reasonable distance, then yeah.
I would dig a little deeper. I would say, is it a legit 2 bedroom, or do you have a different auxiliary room that maybe doesn't show up as a bedroom, as a den, or as a game room? Or can the floor plan be modified where you can add a bedroom for a minimal cost? Let's say, for example, you got a really big family room for maybe $5,000. You can put up a wall and make another bedroom. That's a negligible amount. So it sounds to me like you have, in our industry, there's a term called functional obsolescence. It looks like your square footage is a functional obsolescence. And if you truly have a 2 bedroom, 1 bath, then you're never going to get the maximized return. However, if you have a hybrid floor plan where you, like I said, you have an additional room, or you can modify the floor plan for a minimal cost, then that might be the better way to do it. And I would apply what's called a functional obsolescence adjustment and use a 3 bedroom property.
Gotcha. So that's really interesting, right? Because it just goes back to how every property is unique, right? Like some of these questions, it's like, well, how about this 1,500 square foot to this 1,500, or this 2-1 to this 2-1? But every home has a story, I feel like, right? And every home has differences. That's what makes the job of the appraiser so dang hard, right? Like, it is really a puzzle that these guys are working on, and comparing all of the different things, right? So I love, I love that. Like, even Selvin had asked, right? Like, let's say there's 2 homes that are 1,500 square feet, and but one has bigger rooms and one has smaller rooms. Like, does that impact value because house A has bigger bedrooms than house B? Like, how do you look at that?
Joe, to jump in here, but I was just going to say, it also, when it comes down to like the bedrooms on the area, because like if there is, like, in your situation, what you were just saying, I mean, it's by its preference too, right? Is another bedroom more valuable in that area, or do people value or appreciate like bigger rooms more, right? So again,
Yeah.
down to that as well.
Yeah, and that's where pair sales analysis comes in, and comparing apples to apples. At the end of the day, to remove the uncertainty of what people pay, go apples and apples. If I got a 3-bedroom, use a 3-bedroom, then I don't have to worry about whether people like smaller or bigger bedrooms.
Gotcha. Well, man, we could probably do this for another hour. I think there's a couple of questions that maybe I didn't get to, but I will try to get those questions answered for everybody out there. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. Again, grateful for Zena and for Ralph for sharing so much knowledge. Like, I've done this before. I always learn something new every single time. I just think, you know, when you guys are working with an appraiser, the appraiser's on your side, right? The appraiser's an ally. They're a friend, not a foe. And they want to make it collaborative, right? Just make sure, you know, that again, you're working as professionals, that you know that they're on your side, and everybody's working for a common goal. Everybody wants the client to get the house or be able to refinance the house. So I appreciate you both spending some time with us. Hopefully you guys got their contact info. I know the recording's going to be posted. Some of you gave me your email address. We'll make sure we send out the email addresses, the emails out as well for everybody to make sure that we get all of the slides and the recording and all of that out to everybody. So thank you everybody for joining us. Appreciate everybody. Anything we want to finish up with, Ms. Nancy, or?
Well, first of all, thank you again for taking the time. But I'm sure Zena does as well. We specialize in a lot of non-mortgage appraisals, date of death, trusts, bankruptcy, divorces. So if any of your clients have a request that has nothing to do with the loan, but it's an appraisal request, if you could consider using our services, we'd be much appreciated.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree.
100%. They are a valuable asset, right? There's not a lot of appraisers who are putting themselves out here in a group of 90 real estate agents to talk like this, right? So if you guys need them for those types of things, you know, the date of death, the divorce, family drama, reach out to them. They are amazing resources.
I'd like to say to you in that regard is because, like, we mostly look at the data, right? But as the agents, you speak to the buyers directly, right? So that is such a unique perspective too, and that's why I always do find it so interesting to talk to agents, right? To actually just like have that perspective on, like, they have the thumb right on the market, right? Like on the buyer's side.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good rest of your Wednesday and a great week.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye. All right. Take it easy.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.